come in.
Is there more coming over?
Sure. So just a couple of quick questions just to kick off. So who here is responsible for dealing with hosting providers and hosting suppliers as part of their job or as part of what they do on a day-to-day basis, whether it's... Okay, so a few of you, cool. Just a couple of other questions. It gives me some idea on how best to present the content that I've got here. I guess who here just wants to know a little bit more about the hosting industry here in Australia and the companies that are involved? Cool. What else have I got? Who here is only here because they've got 45 minutes to kill and they don't really care about SEO? So they're not in the other talk. I mean, be honest. It's fine. I do plenty of conferences. I sit here and go, oh shit, I've got 45 minutes to kill. Which one do I want to go to? Which one's the lesser evil? Won't offend me if you put your hand up. That's fine. And who here is just because you've misread the program and you thought this talk is about SEO and you're just in the wrong location? Anyone? All right, cool. Before I jump into it, I'll just introduce myself. So my name's Keiran. I'm the CEO of Anchor. I've been involved in this organisation for about 8 years now. During that time, I've worn pretty much every hat possible within a hosting company, everything from sales and marketing. My background is really technical. I'm a sysadmin by trade, but I've done a bit of everything, product development, marketing. I'm here today for all intents and purposes, and pretty much seen every aspect that there is to run a business. I have presented this talk a few times before. So I will try and tailor it to the audience and what people care about here. There's basically 3 different areas that I want to talk about. The first one is a little bit, or starting off with the relationship between web developers and comparing it to the world of sysadmins. After I do that, I want to go through a couple of tools that I find quite handy for web developers to use when developing websites. Go through them in a really brief and basically just introduce you to them. These are tools that I find that our guys are recommending to our customers quite frequently, so it is something that I do want to go through. I will talk a little bit about cloud computing as well and how it's changing the landscape. Obviously, we're more of a traditional hosting provider. If you ask us, we kind of say that we've been providing the cloud for the past 12 years that we've been in business, and we still think it's the same thing. I think it's a load of marketing BS, but I'm not going to go into it. Not going to disrespect it too much, but I'm going to talk a little bit about how I see it's changing the landscape and what's happening. Before I do that, I used to start this talk by going on about what sysadmins are. I'm going to try and cover off a few things that I like to think sysadmins actually aren't. Now, there are a few, I guess, stereotypes out there that have been self-created, some of them. And I understand it. The industry has evolved quite a deal over the past 10 to 12 years. Firstly, I'd like to think a sysadmin is not this. I think there's a little bit more. I'd like to think there's a little bit more to our profession, the people that just come into work and hide behind computers. We've had this comment that sysadmins actually don't really know what they're doing. They just know how to use Google. They're pretty good at Googling stuff. Once again, I'd like to think there's a little bit more to it than that. I'd also like to think that we're not all bastards. There was a publication that was written probably in the late 90s by a system operator who had far too much time on his hands and fictionally, anyway, took a lot of desire and pleasure out of writing stories about how he could screw his users. And it is quite a humorous publication if you do want to search for it, Bastard Operator from Hell, or BOF. There's quite a long-running series that's evolved over the years. Also, I don't think we're not vampires. Whilst we do operate systems that run 24/7, it tends to mean that we do have slightly different sleeping patterns, and we can end up spending a lot of time awake working on these systems. It's not really by choice, it's more as a result of what we're all about. I'd like to think we're a little bit more than just a slider bar as well. I've spoken with people in the industry who say there's not really much to system administration. If you want more resources, you just kind of move the slider bar and you get them. And it throws more resources. It's probably a little bit of a perception that's came as a result of cloud computing these days. But once again, I'd like to think there's a little bit more to what we do. And I'd like to think we're not Satan. We're not really that evil. We're not all out to get you, whilst it may seem like that some of the time. So I'm just going to break a cardinal rule of presenting and give you an entire wall of text. And that is taken straight out of Wikipedia. I'm not going to go through it all, but there are probably 3 terms there that I'd like to highlight. So the 3 main tasks of a system administrator are installing, supporting, and maintaining servers. That's what we're all about. So what does this actually really mean in a practical sense? They're the ones who find the hardware that actually deploy the web servers upon. They install the networking equipment, they find the data center space. They're responsible for that environment, making sure that it's cool, making sure that it's always powered. They acquire all the hardware, which includes the racks, the switching equipment, the servers. They install the operating system, they install the software that's going to run your Joomla website. So in the cases it's installing PHP, it's installing MySQL. It's then going to tune that to actually make it work as well as possible in the production environment. One of the big things is when we deploy this equipment, we're not here just to deploy it for the short term. We're here to deploy a system that's going to be in production, realistically, anywhere up to 7+ years. And I know that we've got one of our primary mail servers that we've got deployed at Anchor has been in production now since 2001. We deploy these things to run for the long term. And this is probably one of the big things and one of the big focuses that a system administrator actually has. That says that's very much a textbook definition of what a system administrator is. I think there's really two things that defines a good sysadmin. The first one's a pretty simple one, system availability. Fundamentally, if you're a system administrator or you run a web server and it's not up, you're not really doing a very good job. It's pretty fundamental to what it's all about. If the system is down, bring it back. That is all you really care about. In a more practical sense, that means that you implement standards and policies around how the system should run, policies for doing updates, policies for doing backups, for doing ongoing maintenance to make sure that it does run does run properly. More importantly, it's actually maintaining the system in known states. So you actually know how it is. There's not any randomness. You know how the system's going to perform, so you know that it is going to continue to perform in the longer term. The second thing that a system administrator, or what defines a good system administrator, is improving system efficiency, or improving efficiency in a more general sense. Now, this isn't about how quickly a website loads or how reliable it is. I think that's covered by option 1 and the first goal. But what it actually is, it's about your efficiency as software developers or as web developers or Joomla developers, and actually getting the system into a state so it will actually work reliably. At the end of the day, if you need to submit a request to your web hosting provider or whoever maintains your web server and it takes 2 weeks to get it completed and it's holding up your work, then they're not really doing a very good job. So this is something that I really try to instill very strongly in all the system administrators that I work with. At Anchor, we've got about 40 to 50 full-time sysadmins, and this is what we get them very much heavily focused on, these two things, and I think it is the primary decider between your average run-of-the-mill system administrator and a very, very good one. There is kind of a mantra that we've got around Anchor, that a good system administrator should be able to automate themselves out of a job. That's not to say that they're out to make themselves redundant, but they should be able to get themselves to a point that they have systems to do everything for them. For example, we don't build any of the systems that we deploy. If you do that, you're introducing a human element to actually build up the machines. If you're installing everything by hand, you're doing it in a very manual fashion, and we know humans make mistakes. So if we can actually build a robot that'll actually build the machines, we know that we're going to get a much more consistent state, and it's going to be much more reliable, and it's going to run for the 7+ years that we require. On the other hand, we've got developers. I'm not going to tell you who you are, because I think most of you should have a better idea than what I do. But I do want to go through a little bit my perception of what developers are. I think web developers and software developers, Joomla developers, have a very, very difficult and challenging job. You've got to take very vague, hand-waving client requirements into actual usable software applications. I think that's a pretty difficult thing. And I'll say without a shadow of a doubt, I think that software development really is a tough gig. You have a lot of challenges that you've got to work with, including budget overruns, unrealistic deadlines, client scope, system administrators getting in your way a lot of the time. And what I want to try go through a little bit is how these two groups can work together a little bit better in a more general sense. That said, a talk of this nature wouldn't be complete if I didn't go through just a couple of examples really quickly on some of the things that I've seen software developers actually do to get their systems into a working state, which probably haven't been, in hindsight, probably haven't been the most effective things in the world. The first one was using XAMPP. I think that's how it's pronounced. So this is an all-in-one Apache MySQL, PHP and Perl stack. You can actually download it as an executable under Windows or a tarball under Linux, and you basically extract it. It'll actually install Apache, it'll install MySQL, it'll install PHP, and it will just work in every single sense of the word. It's designed to do it very, very quickly. So you can actually have an environment that'll run Joomla within about 2 minutes. You download the tarball, you double click it, you install it, it's done. That said, the opening line of the documentation says that. Sure enough, we see this in production time and time and time again. Putting a machine online in this state is really basically holding up a red flag to a bull and saying, come and get me. It's only a matter of time till the machine gets compromised, and we've seen it plenty of times. An example two I affectionately refer to as trying to use a sledgehammer to kill an ant. Now I know this is a Joomla conference, so people may not necessarily have heard of Tomcat, but it's a little bit, it's an application server that basically runs Java. Now, Tomcat runs in a very specific way. It basically takes over, or the way it needs to have access to all the Java files to actually run. It does all it's logged internally. It's very much an all-in-one web application, primarily used for Java. Now, because it is very self-contained, you need to actually give Tomcat and this application access to read the Java files, otherwise your website won't actually work. So the web developer in question decided that he had come up with a very creative solution to actually fix this problem, to allow the Tomcat web application to actually access the Java files. Now, for those of you not familiar with Linux, that command basically says change the ownership of every single file on the system to the Tomcat user group and the Tomcat user recursively. It basically changes every single file permission, so Tomcat can access it, but nothing else can. Sure enough, if you had actually rebooted that machine, it wouldn't have actually come back. But it did solve the web developer's problem. It got his application running, and given the tight deadlines that he was probably under and he needed just to get it work, it probably got the job done. Fortunately, we did actually find it before he rebooted the machine, and we were able to fix it to make it run on an ongoing basis. The final one that I've got is Ruby is Shiny. Once again, I know it's not a technology that this group's probably particularly familiar with, but Ruby is a new, very agile, apparently very rapid deployment technology. We had an incident where a client was saying, I need this particular gem installed, it'll make my application run better, it'll give me access to this feature set. The problem was it was in alpha, it was actually alpha code. It had been out for about a week and a half, and it had been written with no security in mind whatsoever. This is the email to the response that we said, no, we're not putting this into production. That said, we understood the requirements. We came up with another approach. We came up with another solution. But it's more just what I'm trying to draw here is web developers are working under particularly tough deadlines and challenges. They're trying to get stuff done, and they're just trying to get the systems into a state that will actually work without perhaps or not so much concern towards the actual long-term security and reliability of the machine. So I guess I've got to come up with the question is how can system administrators and developers work more harmoniously? There's a couple of things that would really help us from a system administration point of view. Engage system administrators early in the process. So tell us what you actually hope to achieve. In this group, it should be really, really simple. I want to run Joomla. I want to run it with these extensions. These are the requirements. How do I go about it? How do I make it work well? Tell us the end goals. And let the system administrators actually decide how we're going to get you there. We know exactly how system administrators and operating systems work holistically. Leverage that experience that we can provide and what we can bring to the table. And this one may be a simple one, and it may be one that you've heard many times before, but never deploy to a production environment without testing. There should be a very formalised deployment strategy, dev, staging, production. You need every single one of these three environments. And the dev must be identical to your production environment. The number of times that I hear people deploying or doing their development and testing on a Mac OS and then deploying to a Linux server is pretty much a daily thing. There's so many ways around that, virtualization, Vagrant, so many different technologies that you can actually get an identical development environment and make it behave in the exact same way as your production, and there's really no excuses for it these days. And system administrators can actually help you with that. And come up with solutions and approaches to that. So the next bit that I want to cover just a little bit, how does this actually change in the cloud? So there's probably about 1,000 different definitions of what cloud computing is out there. I'm not going to try to find it, but I'm going to go through some of the promises of what cloud computing can actually do if you read some of the marketing, and there's only some of the marketing collateral that is on the internet. you start looking at this list and some of the things that it can actually do for both your business and running web infrastructure, you start wondering, really, is there anything that it can't do for you? I may be taking a little bit of poetic license for the last two. I didn't actually find any companies that would promise that, but you never know, you never know. And there's a lot of things there. The cloud does crazy things like infinite scalability. Apparently that's just a tick box now. You just keep throwing more hardware at it, it just works, apparently. What I do want to do though, I don't want to really rant on cloud computing too much, but I do want to go quickly through what is involved in deploying hosted infrastructure, cloud computing or not. So you need a data center. You need that either way. You need, so you've got power. Actually, it's a chiller unit, so you need redundant computer chiller units. You need power. You need internet connectivity. You need static transfer switches. You need alternative power sources like gensets on site. You need fire suppression. In addition to fire suppression, you need security to actually maintain the environment, make sure that it's secure. You need to have security involved. And of course you need the evil sysadmins there somewhere. Even if they're abstracted away behind like a pretty user interface that you can slide and get more resources, there are sysadmins in the background. They've designed, they've architected, they've made this infrastructure work. Whichever way you look at that, now being a CEO, I look at the commercial sides a lot more than the technical. Whichever way you look at it, the economics aren't going to change, cloud or otherwise. Call it cloud or not, you still have every single one of these things involved in deploying an environment and the costs exist. In addition to that, under the cloud, as I mentioned, you do actually get abstracted further away from these things because you've got pretty user interfaces in between you and the actual infrastructure behind it. And the question that you've really got to ask is, does it actually eliminate the need from system administrators on your side of the equation? Well, I'm not necessarily sure that it does. You still need the system architects to actually build and design. If you take Amazon, the biggest cloud provider in the country, or in the world at the moment, they've just come to Australia, they've got plenty of cool infrastructure. I could run through it for days. They've got EC2, they've got the ELBS or the load balancers, they've got their Amazon database, they've got plenty of acronyms for everything they do. They have all these acronyms. You still need to actually know how to pull all these together. It's not a silver bullet to actually get this running. In fact, when Amazon actually came to town, they went to great lengths to actually build their ecosystem up around here to actually build up the management component of this cloud service. I can tell you right now, we're Anchor are certified partners with Amazon to actually help deploy and help customers deploy on top of the Amazon infrastructure because it is quite complex. You need to actually build all this infrastructure yourself. I do just want to quickly run through, I don't want to go through the cloud too much, but I will quickly go through some useful tools that people can take advantage of. These are tools that I find that we recommend time and time again to web developers. So there's a quick story with load testing. About 5 or 6 years ago, we had a client, quite a reasonable sized client. They deployed 5 or 6 web servers, or 5 or 6 servers. They had a bunch of front ends, 5 front ends, 2 database servers in a master slave configuration. The front end servers were horizontally scalable. You just add more machines as the traffic increases. Before they went live, they decided to do load testing. Now, being 5 or 6 years ago, they basically built a machine up in their office and tried to throw as many concurrent connections at their infrastructure to see if they could saturate it and see if they could actually make it run out of capacity. That said, they'll do it at the end of a 1.5 megabit per second ADSL connection, and they'll throw it against our network, which has multiple 100 meg links and 7 machines running the back end. I mean, kudos to them to try to do load testing, and it did kind of prove that their infrastructure they deployed wasn't an order of magnitude slower than the one machine that they'll throw in at it, but it wasn't actually all that effective. So load testing has come a long way. There's a software as a service company out there called Blitz, the URL's up there. They purely do load and performance testing against web infrastructure. They can do connections anywhere up to 250,000 concurrent connections over a sustained period of time, and they will actually allow you to thoroughly test web infrastructure in a reliable and repeatable fashion. So what you can actually do, and we'd recommend anyone doing this, especially if you're doing mail outs or anything that's going to drive a significant amount of traffic to your website over a short period of time, go to that URL, throw in your credit card number, do a single test, and try to throw as many users at it that your mail out or your marketing activity is actually going to draw to your web infrastructure, and then watch what it actually does. If it falls over, you've got a problem. And there's no point doing that mail out because you can reliably expect that you're going to see behaviour similar to that. Speak with your web development company, speak with your sysadmin team, and get them to work with you to try prevent that from occurring before you actually try it in production. There's a few other useful web development tools out there. New Relic, which is web application and performance monitoring. That goes to great lengths to actually tell you what your application is doing and what you can do to actually speed it up. It will also tell you any bottlenecks potentially in your web application. It also does monitoring, so that's rear vision rear vision mirroring. So it basically tells you after the event what your web application has been doing. And that's really handy. We use that one time and time again for people that are finding that their web application is slow. We can pull it apart and say, this is the code that you need to fix. Pingdom, this is just availability and uptime monitoring. It basically hits the site once every minute and tells you that the website is actually up and running. It's really to keep your web hosting provider or your sysadmin honest. So if you get the impression that you're getting no traffic between certain hours of the day, possibly a backup's running or something similar to that during the early hours, then you can actually put this tool and it'll tell you whether your website's up and running or not. Git, distribution, revision control and software management system. I won't go into a huge amount of detail, but it basically allows you to maintain consistent code when you've got multiple developers working on the same project. That's really all I've got time for today. I think I've already gone over time a little bit. But if there's any quick questions that anyone had for me. Questions, comments?
You finished too soon. I had a couple of them earlier.
Sorry. Sorry, no, I thought I was meant to be done by 11, so I was just trying to power through it.
I do have one.
Yep.
In terms of, I know for hosting companies in particular, you do have to do your own backups to maintain the servers.
I'd call bullshit on that. Straight up, I'll call bullshit on that. Any hosting provider out there, or any hosting provider worth their salt, should be doing their backups, and that should be part of the service. Should be part of your agreement.
Yeah, so they should be definitely doing their own backups as part of their own systems. But at what point do you put the responsibility of a person's their own server back on them to say, well, your server's been hacked, or your site's been hacked on your particular server?
Yep. Depends on the provider. Like I think any host provider worth their salt, the lines of demarcation should be your code. So it should be managed all the way up to the actual application. And if the hack is contained within the actual web application, within Joomla somewhere, for example, then that should be the web developer's problem. Anything outside of that, it's your web providers, and everything should have that level of abstraction. So it is actually isolated down to that point.
Basic interfaces, or we're talking web hosting solutions and client usability, that sort of thing. Are you using any particular systems as favoured solutions? We're touching on the Plesk cPanel.
No, no, and no. We actually don't like Plesk. We don't like cPanel. We go to great lengths to publish our thoughts on it. I think if you actually go to our website, there's an article that we've got that says why we hate Plesk and cPanel. And we're pretty blunt in our criticisms. The reason that we are quite blunt is we see that it lowers the barrier of entry to becoming a web hosting provider to the point that it's actually too low. To the point that you can go buy an $80 a month VPS from somewhere even less, spend less than that, $4 a month in the US, I think they go for these days, install an instance of Plesk or cPanel on it, and you're now apparently a fully fledged hosting provider.
I've come from the other way, where we used to build our servers Linux-based. Everything was hard developed, and I have transitioned across to cPanel as a necessity more than anything else. It's basically we can't streamline things enough, and we don't have the volume to supply those services efficiently. So.
It's a real challenge. I don't know what the other answer is.
So as a comparison, a solution you might offer, is it restricted to larger corporates because it's so hands-on?
Not at all, not at all.
Or is there a lower end market?
No, not at all. Our hosting plans start at $16 a month. So then $16 a month is our lowest hosting plan. And we do take the approach that it is a managed hosting service, insofar as we're going to do everything for you, but we're going to do it in the way that we think it's done properly. So, I mean, we go from anything $16 a month to tens of thousands.
What sort of tools? We made a tools comparison between say, cPanel.
Yep.
And what you offer is, can you sort of give the client
Yep, sure.
the usability? That's the big gap.
It really depends on It really depends on what usability. I mean, there is without a doubt a feature disparity between what we provide and what you can do on an automated basis with the Anchor offering and the approaches that we take. But we tend to find that the people that actually care about their website being up all the time don't necessarily want all the shiny features. At the end of the day, there's limited value in having auto-install scripts for a lot of these CMSs when they're going to become out of date very, very quickly, and you're just introducing other problems to the infrastructure. So if someone came to us and said, we want to run Joomla, we're like, cool, we'll install the latest available version and use that approach and do that for the same cost point that most other Australian shared host providers do it at. So, yeah, the automation isn't necessarily there, but we can solve that same problem for a reasonable fee, I think. Yep. Any others? Cool. Well, thanks for your time. I'll be around for a little bit longer if there are any other questions you want to hit me up about.